The fire alarm still rang in her ears when Emily Carter pressed her trembling hands against the bathroom sink of the hospital's emergency department. Her reflection looked pale, exhausted, and much older than her 24 years. She had worked 3 double shifts in a row, slept only 3 hours since yesterday, and still owed rent she wasn't sure she could pay. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes, though she had become skilled at blinking them away before they fully formed. But on that particular night, with the rain slashing against the windows like nature itself was angry, Emily felt something break inside her, something small, fragile, and essential. That was when a soft knock on the door changed her life forever. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of the human heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. When Emily stepped back into the hallway, she saw him, a pale, quietly dignified man in his late 50s, sitting in a wheelchair, his breathing shallow but steady. His eyes, an unsettling mix of pain and warmth, lifted to her with a kind of gentle curiosity. She recognized him from the chart. Mr. Henry Lawson, admitted 2 hours earlier with advanced cardiac complications. Widower. Terminal prognosis, months left, perhaps less. A man who seemed to hold sadness like it was part of his own anatomy. Emily approached him, keeping her tired smile in place the way nurses learn to, even when the world inside them is collapsing. As she wheeled him toward his room, the two exchanged quiet acknowledgments, though no words were spoken. Something in his gaze lingered, an unspoken gratitude, or perhaps recognition of her quiet suffering. Henry had seen many broken things, and he sensed when a soul was learning to live with fractures. Emily didn't know then that Henry Lawson wasn't just a patient. She didn't know about the skyscraper downtown whose top floor bore his family's name, or the chain of medical centers he had quietly built over 3 decades. She didn't know that the very hospital she scrubbed floors in as a part-time janitor before becoming a nurse had once been his gift to the city, a tribute to the wife he had loved and lost. She only knew him as a man who suffered in silence, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt drawn to that silence. Her shifts over the following days placed her repeatedly in Henry's room. Other nurses tried to avoid him. Terminal patients often drew emotional exhaustion. But Emily, perhaps because her entire life was a quiet battle, found peace in caring for him. She read to him when he couldn't sleep, adjusted his blankets when he shook from chills, and learned to interpret his nods and half-smiles. She discovered he had a love for old music, classical and soft jazz, and she often left a small speaker on his bedside table playing pieces she downloaded on her own phone. Henry rarely spoke, but when he did, his voice was soft, thoughtful, and unexpectedly hopeful for someone whose future was measured in weeks. Emily, meanwhile, walked home every night through the darkest part of town. She lived in a cramped, rented room above a bakery that kept the whole building smelling of burnt sugar. She could barely afford bus fare, yet she insisted on taking extra shifts when other nurses went home, to warm apartments and waiting families. She had no parents, no siblings, no nearby relatives. Her foster home experience had left her wary of closeness, but she clung to small acts of kindness, holding babies gently, comforting frightened families, and listening to elderly patients tell stories of better days. One night when Henry's condition worsened, he asked her why she looked so tired even after sleeping. Emily laughed lightly, a sound too thin to hide the truth. She told him about juggling bills, about helping pay off her late mother's debts, about eating instant noodles so she could send a small donation each month to a children's shelter she once stayed in herself. She told him she had always tried to live a life that made someone else's life easier, because no one had done that for her when she needed it most. Henry listened as if every word mattered, and in that moment, something shifted between them, an invisible thread pulling their hearts into the same quiet space of need and understanding. Weeks passed. Henry got weaker. Emily grew more attached. But one foggy morning, everything changed. Henry's estranged daughter, Olivia, visited him after nearly 4 years of silence. She entered the room like a shadow, wearing expensive heels, casting judgment on everything she saw, especially Emily. She demanded to know why a young nurse with tired eyes was managing her father's care when their private physician had been available. The tension between father and daughter grew like storm clouds. Emily stepped back, unwilling to intrude on their complicated history. Only later did she learn the truth. Henry had withdrawn from his family after his wife died of a sudden illness. He blamed himself, withdrew from business, and distanced himself from anyone who reminded him of what he had lost. His daughter never forgave him for shutting her out, and their relationship fractured beyond repair. In the years that followed, Henry poured himself into anonymous philanthropy, quietly funding medical treatments for the poor, renovating orphanages, and covering school fees for children he would never meet. But he never told his daughter about any of it. Emily only saw a man trying to fix a world he felt responsible for breaking. One evening, Henry's breathing worsened significantly. Doctors informed him privately that his time was running out. Days now, perhaps less. Emily found him staring out the window, watching the rain like he was memorizing how it fell. That was when he made the most unexpected request she had ever heard. Henry, with trembling hands, asked her to sit beside him. He explained that he had spent his life building an empire, only to realize too late that none of it mattered without someone to share it with. He said he had lost his wife, estranged his daughter, and drifted through his final years like a ghost. And yet, in the short time Emily had cared for him, he felt something he had not felt since his wife passed: genuine comfort, warmth, and faith in human goodness. He told her he did not want to die alone. He wanted someone kind-hearted to hold his hand during his final moments. And if she agreed, he wanted her to inherit everything: his estate, his foundation, his legacy. But under one condition: she had to marry him, even if only in name, so his wealth would go to someone who lived by compassion rather than ambition. Emily was stunned. She felt unworthy, overwhelmed, and terrified of what others would think. She did not love him romantically, but she cared for him deeply, in a quiet, soul-rooted way. She also knew he was truly alone, and so, after a night of trembling contemplation, she said yes. They held a small ceremony in his hospital room. No flowers, no decorations, just two witnesses and a single ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds that morning. Henry wore a simple smile. Emily held his frail hand as if it were the most fragile treasure on earth. No vows were exchanged aloud, but something sacred passed between them in the silence. Henry's condition worsened rapidly after their marriage. Emily stayed by his side every second she could, reading to him, brushing his thinning hair, and whispering reminders that he mattered. She wanted him to leave the world knowing someone cared enough to stay until the very end. Then came the night when Henry's breath grew faint and uneven. Emily held his hand tightly, tears falling freely as she begged him not to be afraid. Henry looked at her one last time, eyes filled with peace, and with a faint, relieved smile, he whispered a thank you, soft as falling snow. He passed away holding her hand. The hospital mourned quietly. Many did not understand why a dying billionaire would marry a struggling nurse. Rumors spread, judgments whispered, but Emily ignored them all. She attended his funeral standing alone under a tree, not as a beneficiary, but as someone whose heart had been reshaped by a man who saw goodness in her when she barely believed in it herself. Only a week later did Henry's lawyer contact her, revealing everything: his assets, his business empire, the trust funds he had secretly established for hospitals and shelters, and the foundation he named after his late wife. And now her. Emily fell to her knees. Everything was too big, too heavy, too miraculous to comprehend. A lifetime of struggle had not prepared her for such a sudden shift. But as she slowly absorbed Henry's intentions, she felt something soft unfold inside her, a sense of purpose deeper than anything she had known. She dedicated her inheritance to expanding healthcare for the poor, opening free clinics, and providing scholarship programs for aspiring nurses from broken backgrounds. She honored Henry not by living in wealth, but by living in service. And as she stood in the hospital garden months later, watching a group of children chase butterflies, she whispered that losing him had given her more than she ever expected: clarity, strength, and a reminder that unexpected kindness can change the world. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach others who might need a moment of hope today. Before you read the final lines, please leave a comment telling us what part of the story moved you the most. Your words mean more than you know. In the end, Emily realized that love doesn't always come as romance. Sometimes it arrives disguised as duty, compassion, and the courage to sit beside someone at their darkest hour. Sometimes the greatest treasures come from the quietest choices. And sometimes fate chooses the most unexpected heart to carry a legacy of kindness forward. And so, a struggling young nurse who once worried about rent became the keeper of a billionaire's final wish. Not because she married him, but because she showed him humanity when he had almost stopped believing in it. Her life did not become a fairy tale. It became something far more powerful.